Now, the International Day of Peaceful Coexistence is observed every year on January the 28th to promote unity, tolerance, and mutual respect among people of different cultures, religions, and beliefs. The day was proclaimed by the United Nations in 2017 to encourage dialogue as a tool for preventing conflict and building lasting peace. It reminds societies that diversity should be a strength, not a source of division. In Nigeria, the message is especially relevant, as peaceful coexistence remains critical to addressing ethnic tensions, religious conflicts, and insecurity. Strengthening interfaith dialogue, community engagement, and youth participation is key to national stability and development.
Well, let's discuss further. For more on this, we're joined in the studio by Dr. Joseph Ochogwu, who is the Director General of the Institute of Peace and Conflict Resolution. Thank you so much for joining us. Nigeria is a deeply troubled country, not because of one single crisis, but multiple pressures, stretching the state thin in terms of handling all these problems. In all your years of working on peace and reconciliation, what has been the biggest lesson that changed your understanding of conflict, and what is something that policy makers underestimate and that could be helpful?
Yeah, I think the point is that, thank you and good morning, Nigerians and the world, on this day that we celebrate the International Day for Peaceful Coexistence. Just straight up to your question, I think the major thing is that peace is increasingly undermined, by society themselves. I mean, peace is something people take for granted. And because they take it for granted, a lot of things happen on the side. So it is only, as a matter of fact, when violence happens, or things get into disorder, that people begin to mouth peace. So peace increasingly is an orphan, as a concept. Because of the intangibility of peace, a lot of people take it for granted. And that is because peace is an abstraction. We are here in this studio, we're living very peacefully, but we take it for granted. So we don't talk about peace. So one of the major striking things for me is the fact that, like I said, peace is often neglected because of the prioritization. The nature of human nature itself is always akin to issues around violence, competition, and perhaps war. So society gives primacy, to issues around violence and war. But the point again is that peace is something that you need to build. Peace is something you need to craft. It's not something that can be contracted. It's not something that you can just wish upon it. It's something that you have to willingly, deliberately and intentionally, calibrate, within your family, within your community, within your group, within your nation state, and even the world as we speak. So it's not something anybody takes for granted. So when the United Nations, in its own wisdom, decided to declare this day, 28th of January, as International Day for Peace, the whole essence is to increase awareness. That there is an increasing change, in the global order. There is an attempt, by some powers to reset the global order to fit their own primary agenda, and that already is causing a lot of shakings, and all that. So, but again, if you look at the United Nations Charter, that peace that was declared by the United Nations, that's the UN Charter, was an aftermath of the Second World War. And where the world came together and said, never again, will the world go into crisis. And that is where we see, for example, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that specifically spells out issues around the management of diversity, issues around inclusion, togetherness, tolerance, non-discrimination along any line of race, religion, tribe, or nation states, and all that. So those principles and frameworks and mechanisms, we are put in place to avert another war, between nation states and all that. Okay. So as much as we try to do that, we try to live in peace. In Nigeria, for example, our constitution is very explicit, on issues around peaceful coexistence among each other. And if we follow the tenets and the spirit of our constitution in the area of our fundamental human rights, the protections and preservations of our rights, and the obligations of the state to the citizens, and citizens' responsibility also to the state, we'll have a very peaceful society.
Okay, so Let me come in here and ask a different question now. In recent months, Nigeria was designated as a country of particular concern by the United States of America. And do you think, from your opinion and from your experience, that Nigeria is more divided than before?
No, I can assure you one thing. Superficially, Nigeria seems to be divided, but I can assure you that if you go to the nooks and crannies of Nigeria today, you'll see diverse group of people, settling together, among themselves. If you go to Maiduguri, where I've been severally, or Sokoto, where I've been as well, or even Lagos, or Ibadan, or Port Harcourt, or Warri, you see different people of Nigeria, of different tribes and religion living. The problem we have actually is in the remote area, the rural areas of Nigeria, where criminal elements, have taken advantage, of the diversities that we have in Nigeria. These criminal elements take advantage of our fault lines, our structural and identity fault lines, and perpetuate evil. Because one of the things that we need to do, largely, is how we try to protect our fundamental values as a people, as a nation. And one of the major values we need to protect is the values of peace. To say no matter your tribe, no matter your religion, peace is essential. And then how also we try to increase the enlightenment of our citizens. Because once you have an enlightened citizenship, the tendency to go violence or the tendency to be manipulated, by certain elements of people, will not be there. One of the things I need to mention also is that what is happening in Nigeria largely is not, Nigeria is not in isolation. We are actually suffering part of the global shifts and global dynamics in terms of global jihadism, transnational organized criminal elements and groups, who are finding our diversity, as a fertile ground, for them to perpetuate what they are perpetuating. But again, like I said, we need to salute the courage of the Nigerian state over the years, in managing resilience, in managing the kind of insecurity challenges that we have. We also need to commend our men, in the military and the security forces and the police forces, for trying to manage what we're doing. And I want to assure, from empirical evidences and field experiences, that I think in no time, we'll see that these things are part of histories, that we've gone through.
Okay, let's look at the theme. Very instructive, commitment to peaceful coexistence and a safe and inclusive world. How relevant does that speak to Nigeria, a country that has ethnicity and religion as a major snag in its peaceful coexistence as a nation? How would you also relate to those that are calling for a conference of ethnic nationalities? Is that the way forward?
You see, the point is that our constitutions are very explicit. One of the major challenges we have, in terms of managing our diversity or managing our situation, is the weaknesses of our sanctioning mechanisms. Every society have what has to regulate human conduct. And once people go ultra, that is, they go against it, it is the responsibility of the sanctioning agency to ensure, that people are sanctioned for whatever offenses, they've committed. So I think that in managing our both ethnic and religious diversity is to ensure that we are stickler, for our rules and regulations, to ensure that when people commit crime, they are punished for the crime that they've committed. We can no longer afford the luxury, of people saying things unnecessarily. As close as Niger Republic is here during political campaigns, there are certain statements you cannot make, and once you make those statements, you'll be brought to book. So we should stop treating some people as if they are above the law. It doesn't matter whether you're in government or you're in opposition. When you fall foul of the law, the law should take its course. And I think that is where the role of the judiciary, comes to play enormously in this particular scene. Justice must be for all, not justice for few. So we need, because any society you live to operate arbitrarily and people do anything they like, then of course you are promoting anarchy. And like I rightly said, outsiders who are promoting transnational organized crime and global jihadism or whatever values they want to perpetuate, they will find our soil as fertile ground, to operate. But once there is enough sanctioning mechanism and there is an application of those sanctions against offenders, then we'll begin to build a much more better society.
So you've talked about how peace is a function of not only security, but also justice, inclusion, and access to opportunities. What's your assessment of the current government's management of the diversity of Nigeria and how that impacts today's Nigeria?
First and foremost, in the management of diversity, you need a sense of inclusion. And that sense of inclusion fundamentally will come from the base of society, which has to do with the economy of the society. We all know where we are coming from. If we followed where we are coming from prior to when this government came into power, you'll begin to understand that perhaps by now Nigerians wouldn't have been able to afford drugs, afford basics, because there would have been a total collapse of the Nigerian economy. So the removal of subsidy, the fluctuation of the foreign exchange by the government was to further reset the Nigerian economy on the foundation, for the future that will thrive. There is no reform that comes very easy. So I think that we have to look at that. And what we are seeing also is political opposition trying to make a capital, of the difficulty that this reform is causing. And I want to appeal, extensively, that if we want a future for Nigeria, we need to begin to build, we need to begin to support initiatives that are okay.
Yeah,
these reforms...
The diversity of Nigeria.
No, I'm coming. Yes. That is where I'm coming. Because if you don't get the economy right, the management of your diversity is going to be on the fault line. But once the economies are okay, and the kind of reforms too that is happening is okay. For example, the local government autonomy, the new world development initiatives that is happening, then you begin to see development, the decentralization of development across the country. Once these things begins to take effect, so people in the north, people in the south, people in the east, people in the west, and even people across different religious lines begin to have a sense of belonging because they are immediate beneficiaries of the reform and the changes, that is taking place in the society. That is one. The second component also is to see the inclusion. If you look at one of the 8 priority agenda of Mr. President, is one of them, cardinal one that I like so much, is inclusion. So we're talking about financial inclusion for small-scale industries, tax relief also for small-scale businesses and people who are earning low. So those are components of how to manage diversity, because one, empowerment itself is a critical element in the management of diversity, where you give your citizens a sense of belonging, and them to understand that there is a future also for their children, that they are giving birth to.
Now, looking at the realities of what is being faced in Nigeria, peaceful coexistence looks like a dream from a perfect world. I mean, how do people begin to thrive amid such high levels of terrorism and banditry in the nation?
Like I said, we are not fighting these insecurity challenges in isolation. And I think that if you see Mr. President visit to Turkey, there is a substantial agreement on the area of security in terms of the poachers. Even what we are doing with the Americans also supports those initiatives in terms of our fight, that we are fighting. And also the prosecution of those people who are arrested. And as well as the elimination, of some of these elements, like we've never seen before for the last 10 years. And I think that we need to give credit, when credit is needed to be given. Because if you see some of the actions and some of the steps and some of the decisive, and I'm saying this because I have privilege, to be in the cycle of certain decisions, at strategic level of what exactly is happening, some of the decisions, that is happening and all that. So what we sought, is the cooperation of the Nigerian citizen. When you see, you speak. When you see, you report. Because government alone can't do a lot of these things. It takes the citizenships and groups. Because as the government is struggling also to achieve certain mileage, so also some other elements who are trying to reverse some of those advantages, that the government is saying. And that is why it has to be a whole of society, a whole of government approach, through a collaborative and cooperative approaches, to ensure that we are able to end this issue of banditry. But yet, as we speak, I can assure you that if you go to the road today, there are people traveling from Abuja to Maiduguri, people traveling all to Zamfara, and all that. So we don't expect a total elimination of this thing. We'll be seeing pockets of them. That is not what we wish for. We want a Nigeria where people can travel 24/7, 24 hours, 7 days in a week without any incident. We pray for it. And I think that there are men and women who are having sleepless nights, who are in the bushes of Nigeria fighting to ensure that Nigeria return to where it used to be in those days.
Okay, how would you react to those calling for equitable allocation of the nation's resources. That has created some tension so far in the peaceful coexistence of people living in Nigeria. So what kind of conflict resolution mechanism? Because you are the Director General of Institute of Peace and Conflict Resolution. So what kind of model of conflict resolution would you be calling for at a time like this?
You see, one of the major framework for conflict resolution is the Constitution. The Constitution, the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. If you look at it, it talks about issues around allocation. And then let's take it gradually, in terms of the fiscal, allocations of resources across the country, based on the criteria that was established during the making of that Constitution. Will we say that we are not managing that rightly? Are states complaining in terms of intergovernmental relation now? Are we saying we are not managing it rightly? Are we saying that the allocations that are due to states and local governments are not going there? And I think that this government saw that there is a mismatch, in the management of that resources in terms of the joint allocation between the state and the federal and the local government. And then the federal government went to court through the Minister of Justice based on Mr. President's directive. And they got that judgment, to ensure that there is local government autonomy. And I can assure you that there is no numbers of civil society that are putting pressure to ensure that that is achieved. And also, I talked about the World Development Initiative. Nigeria has about 8,009 political wards across the different local governments. And I know that over 900 billion, is being raised by the federal government, state government, and local government for wards. What that means is that there will be an allocation, and if you distribute it, you'll be having about 102 million, for each political ward across the country, different from the local government allocations or whatever. So what we need to do, and what society need to do, is to ensure that some of these initiatives work. These initiatives are not hijacked by certain elites, because if this money are spent directly at this ward level, then you begin to see what is transformation, and then you begin to see the sense of inclusion. Some of the issues around marginalization we talk about largely too are elitist driven, because there is no part of Nigeria you go that there is no one problem of marginalization or the other, either at the local level, at the state level, or even at the federal level. But how we use our constitution to address some of these things in terms of constitutional reform, like we are seeing in the Electoral Act amendment and the tax reform and certain things that we do, because society is not a one quick fix thing, it's an ongoing process in terms of nation building, peace building, that we need to do, to get our society right.
All right, very briefly, because we're almost out of time. Beyond press conferences and statements and, conferences, what are the practical ways your organization works in terms of peace and reconciliation for Nigeria?
As I speak with you right now, I have people in the field, that are in Benue, in Kaduna, and there are some also heading towards Zaria and all that. What they are doing is that they are connecting with Nigerian citizens, enlightening them on conflict resolution skills, empowering them, through knowledge-driven, how to engage, tolerate, peaceful coexistence among yourselves, either farmer header, or Christian Muslims, or traditional rulers and youth groups, which are certain things too that are coming up, and also how to. So our own organization, the uniqueness, of our organization is the fact that we work both at the top of government, and then we work both at the local government, at the grassroots level. Okay. And then we'll connect some of the things we see there back to government, for reform.
Thank you very much indeed. The Director General, Institute of Peace and Conflict Resolution, Dr. Joseph Ochogwu. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Unfortunately, this is a very important issue, but we're always pressed for time. And that's all we have time for here on Daybreak. I'm Benga Ashiru. It's goodbye from me.
I'm Constance Ikoku. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.
And I'm Yolanda Robert. Please do keep it here on Arise News. The morning show is next. Goodbye.